On this episode of One-on-One, very pleased to have Mr. Will Theriot with us, and he's done so much for the community and the military museum. We're going to talk with Mr. Will right after the break. Don't go away. One-on-One is brought to you by the Law Office of Waits and Downer. And welcome back. As promised, Mr. Will Theriot is my guest. Mr. Will, so good to have you on One-on-One.
Good morning, Martin. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, and you've done so much, and we were talking before the show, and I can recall you being around in my youth, remembering so many things, and you were always just a big part of the community, and you still are.
And I'm happy to be here. I was involved in a bad automobile accident in March, and I'm still recuperating.
Yeah.
But eventually I'll be back at the museum on a daily basis. My accident caused me to have a fractured vertebrae that has yet to be fixed because the accident in the emergency room discovered that I had an aortic aneurysm.
Wow.
And they didn't know that, I never knew I had one. And they did some research. I had one about 6 years ago, and it had grown, so it had to be repaired before they could repair my back.
So the silver lining was the accident.
The silver lining was the accident
something worse.
gave me something that I had to have repaired.
Wow, that's incredible.
And my family doctor, Dr. Russell Henry, said I had a walking time bomb in my body. It could have ruptured at any time.
And I was telling, I don't mind, I hope you don't mind me telling the audience that you're 87, but I was complimenting you because when we were telling stories,
yes,
your memory is as sharp as a tack.
Well, I'm going to refresh your memory. Before you ever thought about getting into the television business, I was associated with Joe Waits in a business venture, and you came by one time and you wanted to go to California. I was in the office when all of that took place, and we had a connection in California for you to look up.
That's exactly right.
And
San Diego.
That's it. That's it.
What a memory.
And so that stays with me. And also,
Yeah.
I remember when you and James participated in the punt, pass, and kick contest as a youth.
That's right.
And you won several categories.
Yeah.
And so
That was fun times.
it was fun times.
You do have a memory. I do remember you. I drove all the way to California for a summer job.
That's it.
So you were in the office when all that
I was
went
in the
on.
office when all of that occurred. Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Incredible. And of course, I played baseball with your sons.
Yes.
And your daughter's in the studio
Yes.
today.
Yes.
But you've had a very interesting life. Where did it all start?
I have had a very, very interesting life. I was born at Cherry Hospital in New Orleans, but my parents lived in Cutoff, Louisiana. Mm-hmm. My dad was a tugboat captain for most of his life. And until I was 7, we lived with my grandparents. So my grandmother spoke 0 English. So I was bilingual from a very early age. Mm-hmm. When I went into the first grade in Cutoff School, half my class couldn't speak English. We had to wait and let them learn some English so we could proceed. And so from there, as life went on, I wound up aging very nicely and had a very happy life. My parents, my grandparents were very upbeat people. Mm-hmm. And so I've led a happy, pretty much uneventful life.
And so productive life. Let me really test your memory because your house was on the end of Winfield. Do you remember all the stingrays and all those kids driving by to cut that back trail to go to Philisac?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I can vividly remember waking up one night and I could hear murmuring and whispering, and I looked out my window and my yard was being toilet papered. And I snuck out, I went through my back door and snuck around, and this young man had the toilet paper and he was backing up, and he backed right into my arms. And I've never seen a kid run so fast in all my life.
Oh, wow, yes, indeed. But that was the thoroughfare.
It was.
Right
it was,
on the side.
It was the thoroughfare because a lot of activity that took place in Mulberry Park. I lived right across the street from the park. So that was, it was interesting.
How did you end up in Mulberry?
When I got married, I married a girl from Chauvin, and we had a house built that was completed when we returned from our honeymoon. It was a turnkey job. It was a beginning house. It was a kitchen, living room, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom.
Yeah.
And after 12 years, we had 4 children. So I had 3 boys in one room, and Maureen's bedroom was the living room. And the house that we purchased on Mulberry was occupied by Dr. Gremillon, and he left town, and the house came up for sale, and so we bought it. It was ideal for us because we had 4 children at the time.
Dr. Gremio, that's a name from the pen. I think he used to live in Austin, then he moved to where y'all were. Did he end up in California or something?
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's a name from the past.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Your memory's incredible. For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
At the time, I was working at Volkswagen, and I stayed with Volkswagen until 1974, and then in '74, I left Volkswagen and went into the oil field type business, and eventually wound up in business with Mr. Waits. And then when the oil field bust came in 1982, everything was going south. So we sold. We sold out and lucked out, didn't lose any money. And then I went to work for Brady Engine Company. And then from then on, the '86 bust, things got really bad. So I moved to North Carolina. A friend of mine was in the wholesale furniture business. And so he wanted to develop some more territory. My background was sales. So I moved to North Carolina, and I wound up traveling, selling to furniture stores in North and South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, and I had 2 clients in Southern Ohio. So I was on the road 5 days a week. And an interesting sideline of that is I would leave the house on Monday and come home on Friday night, and I would call my wife and say, I'm headed home. And she said, what would you like for dinner? I said, anything with rice. No restaurants in that part of the country serve rice.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize you had left.
I was gone for 20 years. And I retired in 2000.
Yeah.
And in 2000, my wife says, really, we have nothing here. I'd like to go home. I said, but this is so nice here. I said, they got golf courses and this, that, and the other. And so I was able to postpone the transfer for 5 years. And then finally she says, I'm going home, you coming with me?
There you go.
So we came back here in 2005. And in 2005, we built a house in Berg. And being the volunteer type, I had some friends in Cutoff whose goal was to preserve the French language.
Right.
So we would meet once a month at the library and do French. And then Mr. Cliff Shakespeare, who I was friends with, invited me to a roundtable discussion from the Military Museum. And he said, you need to come. And at that one meeting, Mr. C.J. Chris, the founder of the museum, said, we need volunteers. If you can volunteer, even if it's just for an hour. So I went home and talked to my wife, and I said, I think I'm a volunteer 1 day a week. And so we picked Thursday, and on Thursday I got to the museum, and Sarge Henry was the guest, and he really immersed me into the history of the museum. And I found out at the time that I was 70 years old, and I was the baby of the family. I was the youngest volunteer there. They had a computer that nobody could use. It was antiquated. So I brought one of my computers. I was the only one that could operate it. And that 1 day a week turned into every day. And Mr. Chris and I got to be very close, and we worked together.
And now you're the president.
Now I'm the president.
There you go. I remember Sarge Henry Dad would bring him behind my house to fish.
Yeah.
And he hooked onto a big old drum one day.
Yeah.
And he fought that thing for over 30 minutes. And
Wow.
the smile on his face, and he
Yeah.
died shortly thereafter, but the smile.
Yes.
I mean, that was big for him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was always amused because he always answered the phone. Military Museum, this is Sergeant Henry.
But it took guys like you, and it took guys like Sarge Henry and all the dedicated ones who really were so close to the military to make that happen.
Yes.
It's a task, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, yes, and unfortunately, I never served in the military. My brother served in Vietnam. My youngest son, David, was in the Army. So I volunteered to honor them, to honor their service. I was an in-between guy. When they did call me to go take a physical, at the time they said, "Are you married?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "You have any children?" I said, "I have a 1-month-old child," which was Maureen.
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, go home and we'll call you if we need you." And at the time, I I had a career, I had a family to support, so that's how I wound up without serving.
But you were still close to those, like you said,
Yeah.
who served.
Yes.
And a lot of people tell me sometimes it's worse being home and wondering what they're going through than to actually be there.
Right. Yes.
You know, I can imagine what the moms went through.
Yes. And then by then, this was 1957, so nothing, I could have served and just come home and nothing happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Getting back to the museum, it was a struggle with lack of funds, trying to get stuff done. And there was a benefactor that bought the building for us. And then we decided, well, we need money. And at the time, the state had surplus money. And every year, there was like over $100,000 in money available for a nonprofit. So we applied for it and were approved, but the council had to approve of it. And the night that we went there anticipating that we would get this money, the council secretary said, "Wait a while. Really, you can't get it because you're a private foundation. You're not a public entity." So Senator Reggie Dupre got in touch with us and says, "South Lafourche, we created a district where they can add taxes." So CJ and I made many trips to Baton Rouge, council, committee meetings here, committee meetings there, and eventually in 2008, the Terrebonne Parish Veterans Memorial District was formed, which made us eligible for funds. And that's how the museum got funded.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm.
In 2014, we had a ad valorem tax passed, a $500,000, and they gave us the money to get a bond to build the building that you see now. And that was only half that building. In 2014, we extended the ad valorem tax and added the second and third floor.
So everything is built on phases based on the
On money available.
Yeah.
On money available.
But I've seen so many people traversing through there who are not from even close to here. They love coming, first of all, to Louisiana. They love Terrebonne, but they all love to go through the museum.
Yes. Now, I'm bilingual, and prior to the COVID, we had multitude of French visitors, many French visitors. And I would conduct tours in French.
Right.
And they seemed so pleased. And if you come to the museum today, you'll find a letter written by a lady that I gave a tour to in French. And when she got back to France, she wrote me a letter thanking me, and she found in her grandparents' house a 10th anniversary of the D-Day invasion newspaper in French, and she mailed it to us. So it's on display in our museum.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Did you grow up with French?
Yes.
That was it, huh?
Yeah, I mean, my grandmother spoke zero English.
Yeah.
So, and we lived with my grandparents till I was 7. So
Because you're right around my mom's age, and as kids, we used to have to hear her and Daddy talking in French.
Yeah.
Because they were talking about us.
Well, we did. We did do a disservice to our children because that's what my wife and I did.
Yeah.
When we didn't want them to know we spoke French.
Right.
And
Because
then,
y'all don't think we were figuring it out as we went?
well, of
We
course
could tell by the inflection
Of course you were.
that y'all probably weren't happy with us sometimes.
Of course you were.
But what a gift to have French and then learn how to speak English, and then when guests come in,
Yes.
you can
Yes.
communicate with them.
Yes. Yes. It's a happy thing for me. You know, I've devoted now 17 years of my life to this museum.
I know you've been there.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I know Daddy used to go over there and come back and he'd say, yeah, we had some crawfish today.
That's it.
So y'all always worked in a little fun.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. It was.
Yeah.
And so,
But a lot of work.
yes. Now I've known your dad for many, many years because your dad and I joined the Knights of Columbus together.
Yeah.
So I was been friends with your dad for years.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it
Your
seemed like,
dad was such a nice guy.
it seemed like everybody went through the Knights of Columbus too, right?
Hey. Yes.
Give you something good to do that you feel like you could, feel like you're productive.
Yes. And I've always felt like, you know, I needed something to do. You know, I was not one to sit home and,
Right.
you know.
So I asked you this before, but I want you to explain this to the audience because I said, well, Mr. Will, is your real name William? And you said, oh, no.
My real name is Wildrow, Wildrow. I was named after an uncle who was run over by the automobile and killed when he was 7 years old walking home from school.
Wow.
And it was my grandmother's youngest son. So when my parents were going to have me, her request was that they name me after my uncle. So I was, and because my grandmother spoke only French and not English, she could say Wildrow, and she put emphasis on the will. The priest at the time I was baptized evidently phonetically wrote my name as Wildrow. And I can go to the graveyard in Cutoff and see my name on a tombstone, Wildrow Theriot.
Did he have it one word, Wildrow, or Wildrow?
One word.
One word.
One word, Wildrow.
Okay.
And
I've never heard that name. Are you unique? Have you ever?
I've never seen another name Wildrow ever.
Yeah, for Woodrow.
Yeah.
Woodrow Wilson.
Well, I've been called a lot of things. Yeah.
But I would imagine, because I've watched you at the museum, and I've seen the way you endeared to it.
Yes. Yes.
When you wake up every morning, I bet you're dying to get there, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Being involved with the museum changed my way of life because after I retired, I didn't have to get up early. You know? And now, when at the museum, I get up early. I want to be ready. And,
But it's a sense of purpose.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And I bet you've learned some very interesting things along the way.
I really have. I learned a lot of history. I learned a lot of people. People, so many different types of personalities that you deal with. And it's interesting.
For all of your cases, including those with catastrophic significance, call Waits and Downer Law Firm. This one-on-one program has been brought to you by the law offices of Waits and Downer.